What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Watch It in Action. I'm BouseFeenux, and today we're going to be taking a look at Nekros. Nekros is essentially the necromancer warframe in the game, and a lot of his powers work on manipulating dead enemies, stuff like that. Pretty cool guy. He's really fun to play if you like necromancer type, classes from Diablo or something like that. Got a couple of those really neat skills and abilities and stuff. He's a very robust frame, and he's got a lot more uses than people give him credit for. What people use Nekros for a lot is just loot farming, because he has an ability that lets him reroll drops from dead enemies, which is very useful. We have a build for that we're going to be taking a look at, but we actually have two other builds that I think are really interesting as well. The first one here is more of a general play build. This is kind of like play Nekros for fun, and I really like this one. This build kind of revolves around the Shield of Shadows augment here, and we'll talk about how that works here in a second. But the first thing up here, disregard the 4 Forma. I actually have 3 on him. I formatted this polarity wrong. His aura slot comes unpolarized, so you'll have to put one on it. I put a Steel Charge on here because I wanted to get the most out, and then I realized Corrosive Projection was way better, and put that on there. So he's got 2 extra Forma. Really just, 3 in total. 1 for the dash, and then he's got a couple other on here. But taking a look at the build here real quick, we're going to notice the stats. We got 123 power duration, 100% efficiency, 100 range, and 239 power strength. The thing with power strength on this is, in order to get it higher, you pretty much need a higher rank blind rage, but that's going to drop our efficiency too much for this build, so I went with a 5 out of 10. The other thing's the Prime Flow and Prime Continuity. If you don't have these two, you can just swap them out for the regular flow and the regular continuity. That'll do just fine. Redirection, you can swap that out for Vitality or whatever other survivability mod you want, and you'll have space for it. If you want an Exilus slot on here, you're going to have to form a couple more times depending on what Exilus mod you put in there. But otherwise, you should be good to go. So, like I said before, this build works on Shield of Shadows, and that's basically a Shadows of the Dead augment, which is Nekros' ultimate, and we'll see that here in a second. But essentially what this does is it just allows Nekros to be a little bit more tanky, and you'll see that when you spawn enemies with Shadows of the Dead, you'll have a link that is linked to your shadows, and they'll take a certain amount of damage for you, or 50% of the damage you take is sent to, or actually 6% of the damage done to Nekros, so it goes to the shadow guys. But anyway, taking a look at this build real quick, let's see the abilities. The first one we got here is Soul Punch, and we actually have one of our 3 builds is built around this. Soul Punch is basically his projectile skill. It's his number 1, and it just shoots out I guess it's like a punch almost, or like a, kind of invisible force that punches the enemy's soul out of its body and turns it into a projectile, which is kind of nice. It's pretty cool ragdoll skills, so a little bit of crowd control there. Terrify is his main CC ability, crowd control. Basically what it does is it just causes enemies to run around in fear. Kind of a neat skill, gets you out of trouble sometimes because Shadows of the Dead has a very long cast time. So Terrify kind of keeps him CC'd in order for you to cast that without getting hurt. Desecrate, we have a build built around this as well, and essentially what this does is allows you to, force enemies to drop additional loot, is what it says, but you're really just re-rolling them. They have a chance to drop additional stuff, mods, life support if you're on a survival mission, stuff like that. Really cool skill. A lot of people build around this one, and this is the only thing they do with Nekros, but in my opinion, they're missing out. Shadows of the Dead here is his last skill. It's his ultimate, and essentially what it does is, like I said, it raises shadowed versions of enemies that you've killed. So those things are going to, they'll have a damage multiplier, the number of enemies you can spawn is affected, health multiplier and health duration. All these things are affected by power strength. So the higher you can get this without sacrificing efficiency, the better, and I think this build that I have does that pretty well. So taking a look at that, that's pretty much the skill we're building around for this one, and I'll show you how it works. So basically how it works is, as you kill enemies here with Shadows of the Dead, it'll store up to, I think, 16 of the most recent enemies that you killed. So we'll spawn a couple guys here. We can spawn up to 20, but we'll spawn a couple of these guys. These are really helpful. I want to show you a mechanic you can do with Corrupted Ancients real quick. Heavy Gunners, we'll get a few of these in here. Let's see, what else do we want? We want to make sure we use the same faction in the Simulacrum, because if you spawn 2 different factions, they'll just fight each other. And that's kind of annoying, and we don't need to do that for the purposes of this exercise here. So, okay, we got a little hodgepodge of corrupted enemies here, some, a pretty good smattering of something you might see in the Void. We're going to use low level because, I mean, I can show you this at 90, but it's going to work the same at level 90 as it would at level 20. So, I just want to be able to kill these guys really easily and not have a problem with them. So, like I said before, crowd control is pretty good CC. You're going to cast that, and then they're going to have this blue aura or whatever energy color you're using around them. And then you want to make sure if you see any Corrupted Ancients, you're taking those out, because you can spawn those, and you'll be able to use their power, their debuff power. So we got a couple enemies killed here. Let's go ahead and spawn some of them. We're going to press 4. He's going to do this really long cast animation. And these guys are going to start popping out of the ground. And you notice we got our Corrupted Ancients here too, that are giving us their little buff as we stand next to them. So that's going to reduce our damage even further. And then they'll run around and they'll start killing dudes. Now, the cool thing about this, and a lot of people don't know, is you can actually desecrate your shadows as well. Your shadows count as a corpse. So we'll talk more about Desecrate and the Desecrate build here in a second, but yeah, that's just one thing I want to make sure I make sure to mention so I don't forget. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty much the build. I mean, you cast a Terrify when things get a little too heavy, and, you know, you give yourself some breathing room, enemies will run away. You got this really long duration to keep these shadows up, and then you notice the tether there that's tethered to the enemies. That's going to be within 50 meters, and that's going to reflect some of the damage we've taken onto our little shadow dudes. But really, that's how that build works. The second build here is going to focus on the Desecrate skill. And we're going to be using the Despoil augment. So the cool thing about these builds is Nekros has 3 power augments, and we're going to be using one of those for each build. Now, this build is kind of weird. You may not have played like this before, but essentially what we're doing here is we're using Desecrate to consume health and not energy. So that's what the Despoil augment does. It no longer consumes energy, but consumes 50 health instead. If you pair that with Equilibrium, that's going to allow us to get, it's almost like an ammo mutation, but for health and energy. So if you pick up an energy orb, it'll give you health, and if you pick up a health orb, it'll give you energy, etc. This is pretty cool. We have Vitality on here to give us a little extra health, because this is basically our energy now. And then we have Prime Continuity for a little bit of duration, so if we have to cast Terrify or whatever, to give ourselves some breathing room. Fleeting Expertise for more efficiency. Stretch, you know, etc. We got a pretty basic build here. Overextended and Stretch are really important on this. You want to be able to Desecrate for the max range possible. And I'm going to show you how this works. This is a really, really simple build to play. Pretty much all you want to do is kill enemies and then press the 3 button, essentially. I mean, that's really all we got to do. So I'm just going to spawn, you know, a bunch of these guys because it doesn't matter what we kill. So we get down here, kill all these guys. Now, one trick you may not have heard is you want to use a slash weapon. And I'm using the Brayton Prime right now, which does a really good job of cutting enemies in half. When you cut enemies into pieces, those extra pieces actually count as an extra body. So then we use our Desecrate. It's going to spawn health orbs, other stuff. You just see extra items popping out of enemies' bodies. Now, the reason that the Equilibrium works so well is because enemies will constantly drop tons of health orbs, as you see here. So we haven't even killed all these other dudes yet, but let's go ahead and get to it. Let's take them out real fast. And then we spawn them, see all those health orbs pop out. And then we can even spawn our Shadows of the Dead. And when those die, we can Desecrate those too. But they'll drop extra mods, they'll drop life support, like I said. Pretty nice skill. So if you're with a farming group and you're using a Desecrate Nekros, you want to make sure that you bring that slash weapon and you're constantly pressing 3 all the time. Because enemies will constantly be dying. They'll have different pieces, and you want to make sure you're desecrating all those. And with this build, you should be totally self-sufficient. You shouldn't need energy pads or anything like that. The last build here, I can't really show you, but I can kind of explain it, because I don't have somebody here in the simulacrum to demonstrate with me, but it's going to revolve around the Soul Survivor augment, and that augments Soul Punch, which, if you remember, is just a skill here that is a, you know, projectile, launches their soul. But what we're going to be doing with this, actually, is we're going to be using it on our allies. How this build works is when you use this ability on a downed ally, you'll revive them. It's an instant revive. It has no cast time, no nothing. The only problem with this is it will consume all of your remaining energy. The cool thing, though, to kind of cheese this, is if you don't want to lose your whole energy pool, you can use it on other stuff you would use it on. And then all you need is the energy to cast the skill. You don't need a full energy bar to cast this. I want to make sure you guys know that. You don't need a full energy bar to do this. All you need is enough energy to cast Soul Punch, and then you're good to go. The rest of the build here, we've got Stretch, Overextended, stuff like that. It's very similar to the Despoil one. The main differences being no natural talent, and then, you know, we've got the Soul Survivor augment and stuff like that. But this is a really cool way to play Nekros, I think. It's one of my favorite ways to play him, actually, because it's so convenient. When an ally goes down, you can just throw this skill on and hit them, and then they're back up again. It's really nice. But works really well if you also have a Trinity in your group too. So keep that in mind. But guys, this is Nekros. These are the 3 ways that I really play him. I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope you maybe learned something that you didn't already know. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks so much for watching.